Welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud. We're hosting webinars daily. You're watching Ask the Experts, a unique show where each month we ask you to submit questions you need answered by Google Cloud experts. My name is Matt Kershaw, customer engineer here at Google Cloud. Today we'll be talking about security and the cloud. And joining me today
is Jatin Bhatia.
You can ask questions anytime on the platform, and we have Googlers on standby to answer them. So let's go ahead and get started. So, today, Jatin, we're talking about security in the cloud. Do you want to give a little bit about your background in the area?
Yeah, so I'm Jatin. I'm a security and compliance specialist engineer here at Google Cloud. Been in the job since about 20 months at this point, and been focusing heavily on the security, especially when it comes to securing your workloads and data in cloud.
Awesome. Yeah, security really is a hot topic nowadays. It's at the forefront of every IT conversation. So let's go ahead and just jump right into some of the questions we have.
Sure thing.
Awesome. So let's start off. I think there's a big concern with customers on does Google read my data that I have stored in GCP? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, definitely that's a concern that we hear in the field out quite a bit. And especially with Google sort of having a bit of a reputation around that on the consumer side of business. So I want to make sure that I clarify that doubt right up front, that Google does not read your information on the GCP, which is the enterprise side of business. Now on consumer side of business, yes, we may read some metadata from the services, the free services that we provide. And what that does is it goes to better the services and the products that we provide on GCP as well as on the consumer side of business. As GCP or the enterprise customers, you get to reap the benefits out of what we learn from reading the metadata on our consumer side of business. I want to make sure that you're aware on the GCP side, on the enterprise side, there's no information that we touch or read other than to help you with any support cases or any such data incidents if need be.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying there's a firm line between customer-facing Google, public-facing Google, and enterprise-facing Google. Mm-hmm. So your data in the cloud is your data, and we don't really it's yours. We don't have access.
Yes,
to that.
Correct. Yeah, you're the controller. You're the controller and the owner of the data. We are only the processors of it. We do what we need to do in order to meet our contractual obligations to you as customers, and nothing more than that with the information or the data.
Yeah. So I think one piece that lends to that conversation is encryption of data in the cloud. So do you want to talk a little bit about how we handle encryption?
Yeah, sure thing. So first of all, there's no way to connect to Google without having an encrypted network or encrypted connection to Google Cloud. Once the data enters Google Cloud, at that point it's chunked into multiple different pieces depending on the file size, file type, and then every chunk is encrypted or wrapped with its own data encryption key. Now, every single chunk gets its own data encryption key, and then that data encryption key then goes to our KMS, central KMS, which has no non-exportable keys, and it gets wrapped with key encryption keys. So it's a double encryption there in process, and then it also goes a few more layers down on the back end as well.
Yes. Now, if we could take a quick step back, so KMS is our key management store, and so can you talk about KMS a little bit?
Yeah, so KMS is on every service level, and what it does, it has a central key that will encrypt every data encryption key based on the data that is using a specific service or workload.
Okay, and can our customers, I know GCP can provide keys, but can customers bring their own customer managed keys?
Yeah, so with Google, encryption is something that you get by default. It's not a switch you can turn off. Now, where the control comes in for any regulatory or any other security needs is at the KMS side, is at the key encryption key side, where you get to manage or bring your own keys onto Google Cloud. Now you can use Google's own provided services around customer managed encryption keys, customer supplied encryption keys. They can be software backed or hardware backed based on clusters or HSM clusters that Google has on our own end. And on the furthest side, where Google has literally no control of the keys, would be you bringing your own HSM into one of our partner facilities. And if in case you have a paranoia around Google, for example, reading your information, you're welcome to yank that HSM out of the partner facility, and then Google has no access to the encryption keys.
Awesome. So it sounds like really with Google, we've talked about how your data is your data in the cloud, but on top of that, if you have additional security on top of that you need, whether it be regulatory or your own best practices, customers really have a wide range of options for how they want to do things. So, you can get your Google managed keys, you can bring your own keys. It just sounds like there's really, you can basically secure things the way that best fits your needs.
Yeah, and as a security practitioner myself, I can recommend a couple best practices. I mean, what I usually find which meets the best in terms of making sure that there's no performance issues, as well as that security needs as well as the encryption control needs are met, is to use either the customer managed encryption keys or customer supplied encryption keys there. You get to choose when the rotation schedule is. You get to choose the key generation itself, and the management of is how regularly they expire, how regularly you rotate them out. Any data incident that is even suspected that happened, the recommendation is that you rotate the keys at that point. That's something that's controlled entirely by you. Bringing your own HSM, for example, that's probably not a best practice suggested, or it should be only limited to a very specific subset of data which requires that management of the keys there, because it does come with a bit of a performance bottleneck, because every time we need to do anything with the information, with the data that you're asking us to do in terms of processing, we have to reach out to the HSM, get the key or wait for the key to come in. Once the key comes in, because Google doesn't store any of those keys, so once the key comes in, then we decrypt the data, process it, then we ask for another key to re-encrypt that information. Once the key comes in, then we re-encrypt it and send it back to you. So it does create a network and performance bottleneck. So probably not the best sort of use for all data that you have, but usually our default encryption that Google provides suffices the needs for most audit and regulatory compliance requirements.
Right, and you mentioned some customers have very specific needs for their data security requirements. Mm-hmm. You mentioned regulatory compliance. So how does compliance, say FedRAMP certification, things like that, how does that work on GCP?
Yeah, so Google goes through a biannual certification or compliance cycle, and we try to certify as many of our services as possible through that process. You can go and read more about all our certifications on cloud.google.com/compliance. It lists out all the certifications that we have, as well as what services or what products on Google Cloud, on GCP, that comply with that information or comply with that regulatory requirement. At the end of the day, cloud does come with a shared responsibility there in terms of securing your workload, securing your data. So that stands true for compliance as well, where we provide tools and services that you can use to be compliant, as well as Google coming in as a compliant vendor as well for you to use some of the already certified services which help you with that compliance process.
Yeah, so let's talk about that shared responsibility model a little bit more, because when I'm dealing with customers in the field, this is a big topic with them. Mm-hmm. And one question I always get is, we say that our infrastructure is HIPAA compliant or FedRAMP certified, for instance. What does that mean for them? Because a lot of times someone comes in thinking, okay, it's FedRAMP certified, so my workload's FedRAMP certified. So let's talk a little bit more, what is the shared responsibility model? At what point, how much responsibility does GCP have versus how much responsibility does the customer have?
Right. So Google being FedRAMP certified or HIPAA certified, or some of the services that you're using being FedRAMP or HIPAA certified, doesn't mean that your workload or your data becomes automatically FedRAMP compliant or HIPAA compliant. There is still additional responsibility on your end to make sure that you're using the necessary tools and services that Google provides, as well as some third-party products, to make sure that the controls that need to be in place are taken care of, are put in place. Google cannot put those in place for you. We can only provide the services that you can use in order to be completely compliant there. Google helps out with coming in with as a vendor with compliant services, so that helps you, that reduces the responsibility on you to meet all the controls and needs. Like encryption, for example, Google provides that by default, but there are still responsibilities that you need to take care of in order to be completely compliant with all these regulations and audit needs.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like the moral of the story is it's a team effort. That's why I call it the shared responsibility. We'll give you the platform to build a secure workload, but then it's still up to you to kind of make sure that your workload itself that's sitting on our infrastructure is still secure. It's kind of like I can give you a door with the best lock in the world, but if you just give keys out to everybody, it's not necessarily secure.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's jump to a different area. DDoS is a big topic. It seems like every other week or so there's some website that was taken down by a DDoS attack. How does GCP handle DDoS?
Let me step back on that one and maybe take the answer out to the Google as one, right? Google, as you know, is serving 1 billion users on 8 different products now worldwide. So we are always, and we're storing a lot of information that we have, which is goldmine for a lot of hackers, attackers, a lot of problem states as well. So we have to make sure that we secure our environment against such breaches, against such attacks. And DDoS is one of those, right? DDoS is one of those attacks. So Google, first of all, our answer has been to put as much bandwidth and as much computing resources, as many computing resources as we can in front, so as to thwart any such attack. We also have Google front end, which isolates any DDoS attack into one specific area or one specific place, and then that way our users don't see any interruptions or face any issues, and we can handle the DDoS attack from there on. Google also has about 1,000 times the bandwidth of the largest DDoS attack ever recorded in history. So it will pretty much take a coordinated internet effort to successfully DDoS a network like Google's.
Right, yeah, and I know some of my customers are using Cloud Armor. And can you talk about how Cloud Armor can add some additional protection?
Yeah, so on the application layer side, where the application is then deployed on the public side from you, on your end, deployed using our Google Cloud, Cloud Armor would be the tool that will help you with L7 and L3 level DDoS preventions.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like we have we have protections in place all the way from the edge, all the way to the the workload in the back end in our data centers.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So. That's the way I've heard it explained is, Google is pretty much being DDoS attacked 24/7 by, bad actors all around the world. So our core competency as Google kind of gets passed on to you as a customer of GCP and helps protect your workloads.
Yep.
When we first started the conversation, we talked about security being a hot topic, and there's a lot of crossover between security and privacy. And end user data privacy is really important. Does GCP offer any specific services that can help out with protecting end user data?
Yep, absolutely. As I mentioned, cloud security and privacy, for that matter, is a shared responsibility. And however, Google doesn't just leave you alone in that. We try to help out as much as we can. So we have state-of-the-art DLP API, which helps you identify any kind of PII information, PHI information, a lot of pre-built, predefined detectors that are already there that that are trained using machine learning models to identify any such information within the data you're bringing in. Of course, you have to explicitly opt in and let the DLP API scan your data. Again, Google doesn't automatically go in and read your information or scan your information there for any such predefined detectors. We also help out with not just detecting that, but also tokenizing it, scanning it, or masking it for that matter as well, for you to make use of the data, but not let anyone else read even your own end user or end client's information. On the some of the other sort of capabilities that we provide are Cloud Security Command Center, which I would recommend looking at as well, which is available at the organization level. And what that lets you do is, say, for example, opt into DLP API scanning, and it surfaces any information, any PHI or PII or any such sensitive information that it finds, credit card numbers, birth dates, things like that it finds on the data that you brought into the cloud, that you brought into Google Cloud, on the buckets that you have, and other storage layers as well, or other storage products and services as well. And then it surfaces that up as a card in the Cloud Security Command Center. So you're at least aware of what DLP was able to find, even if there was some bucket or two that was, or data set that was missed out, in terms of classifying that as sensitive information.
Yeah, the DLP API is one of the products I think is most interesting that we have, because data security is really one of those things that everyone would be 100% secure if they could,
Yep.
But it really comes down to the effort level required, and the DLP API really makes it a lot easier, like you said, to surface that data, to help basically help my end user by protecting their data.
Yep.
And you mentioned the Cloud Security Command Center. And I know DLP API data, surfaces in there, and that's one of the places. What other things can you monitor using the Security Command Center?
Right. So Cloud Security Command Center is a canonical sort of one pane of glass, which goes through again, given that you opt into it, goes through, say, for example, your cloud audit logs as well, and finds any anomalies that it sees and surfaces those up as well. It gives out a list of all the inventory that you have organization-wide, not just on one project or two projects or just on one service, but it looks through all of the different services that you have, different products that you're using, and puts that up as inventory. Now you can go in and do some more forensics within CSCC, the Cloud Security Command Center as well, where, say, for example, you saw a bucket that had PII information as was identified using DLP API by Cloud Security Command Center. You can do a query on it and see if it has if it's open to public, because as we know, some of the more known attacks have been due to open or breaches have been due to publicly open buckets that had quite a lot of sensitive information in there. So it tells you, by doing such queries, and you can save these queries as well, where if a bucket has PHI information, for example, and it's open to public, it's probably not the safest way to secure the sensitive information.
Yeah, and I think Jatin brought up a great point. One of the most common cases you do hear about in the news lately is insecure buckets out in the wild that malicious actors find, and there's PII data stored in there. And that goes back to what I mentioned about the effort level required to kind of secure your data. With these tools that we have, all accessible, all the data kind of funnels into the Security Command Center. The data comes in, and I can see which buckets are insecure. Then I can see what sensitive data is within those buckets, and it really helps me as a user prevent those common scenarios from happening. So that's why, I'm a big fan of our Security Command Center, just because it makes things so easy to do. So we talked about certification and regulation. The financial industry is one vertical that there's always some type of apprehension to doing work in the cloud. Finance, anything with money is always going to be extremely sensitive. So is there any regulatory difference between the way a bank would handle things on-prem versus in the cloud?
Yeah, I think PCI DSS would be the regulation that they would need to comply with as one of the bigger ones rather, for sure. On the cloud, of course, the responsibility is shared between you and Google, for that matter. So Google does take care of a lot of things that we need to do, and PCI-DSS is one of the most prescriptive regulations or controls, recommendation that's out there. And Google provides a customer responsibility matrix as well on exactly what controls need to be placed to secure what kind of information, which helps out the financial services industry a lot. And that's where we see a lot of FinServ clients being very successful on Google Cloud.
Yeah, so we do have financial institutions running on GCP today. Yep, that's awesome. Yeah, that's, like I said, anytime you're talking about money, that conversation always becomes 100% about security. It's always at the forefront, but it really just gets emphasized once you're dealing with the financial industry. But at GCP right now, we have many financial services companies running successfully. Thanks to a lot of the security tools that we have in place now. We were talking about DDoS attacks, intrusion detection, things like that. Some customers are already working with, whether it be firewalls like Palo Alto Networks or Alert Logic, and they're using these tools on-prem. Are they able to bring those same tools into GCP?
Yeah, so that depends on, that conversation would depend on the tool as well as the architecture that the tool is trying to use, or the architecture of client solutions altogether on Google Cloud as well. However, a lot of these tools like Palo Alto Networks, as you mentioned, are also offering their own services via Google Cloud as well. Palo Alto Networks currently is a great partner who also uses Google Cloud, for example. So if you were using those tools, on premise or somewhere else, you can continue using the same tools, and then there is no real sort of learning curve there, and you can continue using those to protect your own workloads as well as continue doing the meeting the regulatory needs that you already were on premise.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of our like we mentioned specifically Palo Alto Networks, Alert Logic, they were just a couple that came top of mind as partners that we have in GCP to make it really easy to bring the tools that you're familiar with on-prem and easily use those same tools within GCP within your cloud environment. So you can have the same level of security that you have on-prem as you do in the cloud. We have a few minutes left. Would you like to talk about any, best practices around security that customers should follow when they're in GCP?
Yeah, so actually just to round off the earlier point around providing third-party capabilities. So yeah, Google does a lot in terms of providing resources as well as services to secure, your workloads as well as your data on Google Cloud. However, if you do need to, augment any capabilities for your own reasons or compliance or regulatory needs, there's a lot of third-party products and services that we comply with as well. Now these third-party products as well, a lot of them also surface up their own, cards, like for example intrusion detection or any such other or WAF needs, for example. They feature their own cards in CSCC as well. So we have a sort of end-to-end integration with a lot of these third-party products. So Stackdriver would be one of the products that is Google's own logging and monitoring tool. But say, for example, you were using a SIEM like Splunk since a while on premise or on any other clouds, you can continue using that because Stackdriver can export logs out to your Splunk as well. So a lot of ways to augment the capabilities that you were already using and continue using the same, and don't have to buy into the Google native tools only.
Yeah, and I encourage people out there to kind of check out our partner network and see all the we have a lot of different, like you mentioned specifically Stackdriver and Splunk, but there are a ton of integrations out there that we have to make it easier to use the same tools that you're already using. So I know I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit.
No worries.
Yeah, but were there any other, best practices, things like, everything operates on least privilege access in the cloud, or do you have any best practices that you just like to, tell people about around security in the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the best practices would be to make sure that least privilege is definitely that is something used. Google tries to do our part in making sure that some best practices are by default applied to your environment that you have to change explicitly. For example, if you needed to make up a bucket public or an object public, you need to explicitly go in and do that, because all buckets that store your information, that store your data, are private by default. They're not just something that's given a public access. Same thing with VMs as well. They don't automatically get public access or public IPs right away. One more thing that Google is trying to do is bubble up this concept of a VTPM into the VM space, which is one of the most used products when it comes to really any cloud anywhere, is by having sort of secure boot process in place with the VTPM there. So, and that offering on Google Cloud is called Shielded VMs. Definitely would recommend going towards using shielded VMs, because again, there's no additional cost to using a non-shielded versus a shielded VM. And what Google is trying to do is just make shielded VMs the default going forward. And of course, that there's a bunch of different OSs that guest OSs that these VMs run. So we're slowly working through all of them and making sure that all the most commonly used VMs at least are available as shielded VM offering. So depending on the offering within IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, there Google tries to do its part in helping you apply those best practices by default. And then of course we have very extensive documentation available on cloud.google.com website as well.
Yeah, awesome. Jatin has really covered a lot of different material. We've covered everything from hardware security modules, cloud security command center, encryption. I think the summary of today's chat has kind of been, we in GCP make it easy for you to do security the way that best fits your workload. You may have your own regulatory concerns. You may have your own very data specific requirements around security. But whatever it is that you're doing on-prem right now, within GCP, we try to make it as easy as possible for you to fit what it is that you're doing, to make sure your data is as secure as possible and your end user can really kind of get the level of privacy that they desire. So Jatin, it's been great chatting with you.
Okay.
And thank you for tuning in. Please visit Cloud on Air for more content from Google Cloud experts.